live here.
We're live?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are doing Ask the Expert remotely today. So I started this Ask the Expert at we got the idea in March after the shutdown. And the whole concept here is every week to introduce you to a different local business and share some really good knowledge with you at the same time. Helpful for around the home or relating to the real estate market. And it's been really fun to meet these business owners and people who serve our homeowners and our buyers and sellers. And so this week, and I'll introduce him shortly, we have Lafayette Anderson of Anderson Electric. But again, my name is Ann McClure. I'm a residential realtor with McInerney Associates, and I work by referral in close-in Northern Virginia and Montgomery County, Maryland, and then I've got partners in DC. And so we hope that you find the information today very helpful. We're going to go through some questions with Lafayette, and I'm going to ask him some questions that I've developed out of home inspections and questions from my clients. And then if we have time at the end, we'll allow for a question or two from the group. But we also have the contact information. So if you've got questions for him later, you can certainly ask those questions or email us, or we'll put you in touch with Lafayette. So thank you again for joining us for this week's episode of Ask the Expert. And the other thing we would ask is that if you're looking at this, if you would like us, we're on Facebook and YouTube. And if you would share the link or video with anybody you think the information might be useful for, we've been really overjoyed to have a few of our experts get business out of this, which is the whole point, was to disseminate good information and to also maybe help connect good business owners with some consumers who needed help. So thank you for that. And if you're willing to share or pass along, we're very appreciative. I always like to start with a little update on the real estate market. So forgive me, I'm working remotely, as I mentioned, and I've got a different setup here. So I'm going to look down a little bit. But what I wanted to tell you is that my lender friend, Sam Galbraith, sent me an interesting email that I wanted to share a little bit of with you, because everybody's curious how the pandemic has affected real estate. So this is a national statement. A new study from Clever revealed that 42% of home buyers who made a purchase during the January to May time period ended up in a bidding war, demonstrating the strong demand for homes amid low inventory. So that is really interesting to me because we have people who've been sheltering in place. We have appraisers and home inspectors who haven't wanted to go in properties. I mean, we've had a national crisis, and yet buyers are still very, very motivated, and sellers are motivated, and a lot of real estate is happening. So I thought that was really interesting to know that almost half of the homes across the country that sold between January and May, and then of course March, April, and May were heavily impacted by COVID, they ended out in a bidding war. So bringing the information a little bit more local for you, I like to share what's been going on in the DC metro region. So we do updates on McInerney.com, or you can go to annmcclure.com for more information. But I wanted to share with you that if you look at last week and the same week the year before, we found that contract activity was almost unchanged. So we've really come out of this, and we're sort of experiencing March and April and May right now in June and going into July. So the total number of, let's see, actually, let me say this, after 3+ months of volatility, we seem to be in a pretty stable place. The total number of newly ratified contracts was down less than 0.5% last week throughout the whole metro region. 1,803 homes versus 1,811 within the jurisdiction, showing increases, and then 3 showed decreases in contract activity. But again, the average around 0.5%. So on the plus side, Loudoun County led the way, up 13.2% with contract activity, followed by Northern Virginia, which is Arlington, Fairfax, and then the cities of Falls Church, Fairfax, and Alexandria. And then Washington, D.C. was up 3.2%, and Montgomery County was down 8%. Prince William was down 7.9%, and Prince George's was down 3.1%. So, you know, on average, we're still doing. Another interesting tidbit. Properties last year, the same week I described, were going under contract in 30 days on average throughout the region. Well, this past week, they went under contract in 25 days. So they're moving much more quickly. I mean, that's a pretty good percentage, 5 days. They're moving more quickly. So again, I've been saying it, motivated sellers are selling, motivated buyers are buying. So if you would like to talk more about your specific area or an area you're interested in, please let me know. You can reach out to me and Jennifer, and I'm happy to have discussions with you and pull some statistics. In fact, I'm working real hard on an analysis today for property in McLean. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker. Here he is. Hi,
hello.
Lafayette.
Hey, how's it going?
This is Lafayette Anderson. So happy he's joined us today. I wish I had a tally of how many of my clients he's helped, because it's a great sum. And I want to say that Lafayette is a master electrician. He has been in the industry for about 3 decades now, and he has owned Anderson Electric for 9 years. The reason I like him is he's very competent and very skilled. And he's really good about when he meets with a client, instead of trying to upsell them on everything new they need, he'll say, let's try this. And if we can get it to work, I can save you a little money. And if it doesn't work, we'll try this other option. And I really appreciate that for my clients. Also about Lafayette is that he's a DC native and he's a family man and he loves to bake apple pie. So hopefully someday we'll be able to try his apple pie. So Lafayette, thank you for joining us.
Certainly welcome. Thanks for having me, Ann. Appreciate it.
Are you frozen? Uh-oh.
Look, I'm a little frozen. Are you frozen or I'm frozen? I see you look frozen.
Here you go.
Is it better?
Okay. I don't know. Can you hear me, Lafayette?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
That challenge here. It looks very serious to me.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. We
That's
lost
better?
you for a second. Are you frozen? Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I did a little intro of you, and then I said thank you so much. We're happy you're joining us today.
And I'm certainly honored to be joining you as well, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, we did a little update, and I gave them some background, so let's launch right into the questions.
All righty.
I just mentioned some of the things that I like about you and why I feel really comfortable referring you. And the other thing I didn't mention is that you never leave a job unsafe. You have a really strong commitment to making sure that wherever you are, you leave the house, or I know you do commercial work also, in better condition than you found it. And if you find a surprise, you stay and take care of it until it's fixed. And I know that sometimes can make you late to your next job, but I love that you don't leave something unfinished or unsafe. Really makes me feel good on behalf of my clients. So I was just wondering, as far as safety in the home, and I know you do safety checks and we can talk a little bit about that later, but would you share with us 1 or 2 of the biggest safety hazards that you have run into fairly often in residential?
In residential, one of the common things that I've been coming across here lately is folks having their extra deep freezers and refrigerators not GFCI protected. Of course, it would be a nuisance if the GFCI was to trip and the homeowner would not know, and then they lose all this meat. But I know they would prefer to lose all the frozen food before actually losing a life or a kid's life or something like that. And
Right.
let me go into a little specifics with that. A lot of times these older refrigerators and freezers come in contact with water, I guess, when they defrost and all. So they actually have a ground fault internally. So the surface of the refrigerator becomes has current flow on it. So a lot of times in your garages and basements, they have a concrete floor. So someone's running out to go get something out of the fridge, they're barefooted. Now they've come in contact with the earth. They touch the surface of the refrigerator or freezer. Now they're completing a circuit and can possibly lose their life. So those are some of the things, that's one of the things that I've noticed as well. Of course, a lot of homes I go in, they have a lot of loose outlets and all, and you should actually secure those outlets because you could cause the wires to become loose and now actually cause some heat to start and possibly cause a fire. GFCI in the kitchens, a lot of older homes still don't have the GFCI protection in the kitchens. So keep an eye out for GFCIs in the kitchens and wet locations, loose outlets. Make sure that your smoke detectors are changed every 10 years. Make sure that we test them, at least once a month or weekly on your smoke detectors, and test your GFCIs monthly.
Okay. I really like the point. I mean, it's a scary point, but I like that you raised the thing about the fridge and the freezer in the garage, because I bet that happens all the time. People don't even think about it. They're like, oh, I'm remodeling the kitchen, I'll move the old one outside. And they don't think about the fact that in the kitchen it was protected, but in the garage it's not. So all my clients watching, if you have that, make sure you've got a GFCI out there. If you don't, we happen to know a good electrician.
Right. Now you're welcome. Now code requires you to have GFCI protection in the garage and also in storage areas of the basement, unfinished areas. But a lot of times people still don't have that protection, so they want to make sure that they have that.
Yeah, or it was like an old Rambler and they did the stuff in the kitchen bathroom.
Right.
So along those lines, I mean, you just gave us some really good tips for like safety checks, and people, can be checking for loose outlets, and people can be making sure that they don't have this hazard with the fridge or freezer. But are there other things that they should look for around the home that they might, you might not consciously notice, but you need to make an effort to notice, sort of red flags or concerns?
Just make sure that if you had some recent electrical work done, that if there are any open splices, they should actually be made inside of junction boxes. The junction boxes actually have a fire rating to protect, the combustible materials in your home from a fire. So you definitely would like to make sure that you have all the splices in junction boxes to keep people safe from brushing against them or fire hazards.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. When you are using like a dimmer in a, here's Lafayette's information, some of his information. Who needs an electrical home inspection? If your home's 40 years old or older, those are prime candidates for the ones who don't have the GFCIs everywhere, right?
Yes.
You've
yes,
undergone
absolutely.
Added a major appliance in the last 10 years. We're going to talk about electromagnetic fields in a moment here, but one of the most common questions I get, Lafayette, and we're going to circle back to that one, is about aluminum wiring. And I guess it became popular at some point because of short supply of other materials, and it wasn't identified as problematic at the time of installation, or it wouldn't have been used. But now we see a lot of houses that were wired, I guess, in the 70s, right, with aluminum wiring.
Yes.
And now occasionally people say, oh, you have aluminum wiring, you got to get the whole house rewired. And then I've heard another school of thought that is, well, actually, it's just the way the connection happens. Copper connections with the aluminum, if the connections are done the right way, you should be okay. Can you speak to that? Because I feel like there's some misinformation out there.
Yes, I can speak to that. Aluminum wiring is tricky. Of course, definitely it is a conductor. It's less expensive than the copper. And in the 70s, and when you had the Vietnam War and stuff, a lot of the copper was used for bullets for the war. So they used copper in the homes. So it's not as good of a conductor as copper. But when you actually have these joints, anytime you have the connections, splices, locations at your receptacles, lights, those areas can actually become loose, and that's when they become hazardous and all. So you want to make sure that they actually have an inhibitor to try to prevent or eliminate some of the oxidation on the cable that can come, because we do know that aluminum expands and contracts with temperature changes. So I'd really recommend that someone actually, if they have an older home, to possibly have an electrical contractor out to actually provide some maintenance on tightening up their receptacles or even replacing them. But the main thing, if they're replacing the outlets and switches, that they use terminals and devices that are rated for aluminum. And that's the problem. A lot of times these devices that people are replacing are not rated for aluminum wiring.
Okay. So the trigger then really, because if somebody moves into a 1972 Rambler and they don't know what kind of wiring they have, and home inspection, you're not opening up the walls. So really the trigger for them is, hey, because of your home, you have a lot of history, why don't you just have an electrician out to check this for you, right?
Absolutely, have an electrician come out, or if they do get that home inspection, you can actually identify and say, oh, we do have aluminum in the house, because you can go right to the head point at the panel. But definitely having a competent electrician come through and actually look in that panel for you.
Okay, good to know. Maybe one of the things we need to consider when we're scheduling home inspection is see if we can get an electrician to pop by,
Okay.
Take a look at things. Lafayette, so that's like a safety concern that I hear a lot. I sell a lot of resale homes, but one that you made me aware of and that I really want people to hear more about and think about is electromagnetic fields. Now, you told me that these can be dangerous and people should really be aware if they have this hazard in their homes. It's maybe believed to cause some sickness, which I'd like you to speak to. Just things you've noticed. So could you talk about that a little bit and how people can find out if they have a problem and what they can do to fix it?
Okay. So yes, if anyone actually has a concern that they possibly may have a strong or electromagnetic field in their home, they should call an electrical contractor or purchase a gauge meter that tests electromagnetic fields in their homes. I've recently had several calls where I went and tested, or you had a homeowner concerned about the fields in their home. And one of the things that I did notice is in 2 instances, children actually had cancer that were living in those rooms that had the high electromagnetic fields. So it seems to actually attack children at a young age and possibly adults, as far as depression, Alzheimer's, and some other concerns there. One of the ways that you can check, it could be something calls from the utility company, possibly having a lot of slack underneath the home. If you're close to power lines, you can check that. You can know whether or not it's the utility company if you actually just turn off your main breaker to the house and actually check and walk around with your meter. And if you still have high levels, you know that it's not something in the home, that is actually coming from the utility company and all. Some of the ways to fix it is basically you could go around with your meter in the house, and you can identify it by turning one breaker off at a time. And when you actually see that the field has reduced, you can identify it at least to that circuit, and then you possibly can get an electrician to come out and troubleshoot that circuit and find the problem for you.
Have you, what would trigger somebody to say, gosh, maybe this is the electromagnetic fields in my house? What would come through a consumer's mind that they could notice and say, I better have an electrician out? Is there something they notice?
I don't think it's anything they notice. I think a lot of times people are concerned about their children, from what I've seen so far, and they've been educated in that area. It's not something that you can see. But if you're concerned about whether you had a professional electrician in your home, that's one of the ways you can actually go behind them and check and see, okay, did my magnetic field increase or decrease when this electrician worked in my home?
And should it increase or decrease, or should it stay the same?
It should. Hopefully it stays the same, or decrease if they were coming there to do some repairs. Okay.
Very interesting. So, to my health conscious folks out there, I mean, anybody, we want you to know about this, but if there's something you're real concerned about, it sounds like you can get a meter or get someone like Lafayette to come out to check. And it sounds like you also probably want to check behind your electricians. Maybe even what about HVAC contractors? Can they disturb that, Lafayette?
Anyone can disturb it. It depends on whether or not they're tapping into an existing circuit or doing a dedicated circuit. A lot of the HVAC equipment is 240 volts, and it's actually dedicated to their equipment. So usually you should be pretty good. When you start intertwining stuff with other circuits, a lot of times that's where the problem comes into play.
Got it. Got it. Okay, interesting. Well, I mean, I want to learn more about that. I want to research it some myself. So another one I hear a lot, it comes up all the time on home inspection reports now. It didn't used to, and now it does, is the AFCI protected outlets should be installed. And then people get confused. They go, well, I thought he said GFCI, or was it AFCI? What's the difference? So could you speak to that a little bit and when they might be necessary?
Well, AFCI is necessary, my benefit all the time now. You should put it on every circuit in the house if you could. And the 2020 code now is basically mandating to actually put it on all your circuits in the home now. They're going to be starting requiring on all of your circuits. In 2005, AFCI came out, and it was strictly for the bedroom circuits, and then 2008 circuits like bedrooms, and it just increased. And then you have some supplemental codes for like Virginia, where they're not requiring it in certain areas. It depends on your jurisdiction whether or not they're going to require the AFCI protection, but I think that you should have it all the time. AFCI stands for Arc Fault Circuit Interrupter. So that circuit breaker or outlet is very smart. It identifies an arc on the circuit, and it helps you with fire prevention to prevent electrical fires in your home.
Okay.
And one of the things that I had mentioned before is that the AFCI can also protect you against high electromagnetic fields as well.
Okay, I think Jeff put up a slide that might show some of that arcing, but keep talking. I'm sorry, the fields.
Right. Yeah, so if the circuit is wired incorrectly, the AFCI breaker will not actually work, and it'll protect homeowners against faulty wiring. So in addition to electrical arcing on the circuit, it'll help you and protect you against open neutrals, shared neutrals, and things of that nature that can cause high electromagnetic fields.
Okay, interesting. Lafayette, can you see the screen from what you're working on?
Yes.
I think we've got some burned outlets and one of those, is that one of those smoke detectors with a light on it or something?
Yeah, see, you got a smoke detector. That looked like a smoke detector that has basically like a notification letting you know that there is a problem with this smoke detector here. So it's going to let you know. That
And
light should come on.
There's your AFCI. So that looks like it goes into the panel versus GFCI, which is at the actual outlet where we use as a receptacle, right?
Right. So for both of those, AFCI and GFCI, you can get GFCI breakers and AFCI breakers and also AFCI outlets as well.
Okay, so forgive me if this is ignorant, but you can have a GFCI outlet that's AFCI protected?
Yes, absolutely. So if someone was actually having a television installed, so they added a new device in their home, they extended a circuit, they can actually now make that television AFCI protected by installing an AFCI outlet and not necessarily going back to the panel and installing an AFCI breaker. So anything in addition that they add to a circuit, they can protect that circuit by putting an outlet on the circuit.
And over here on the right, we've got knob and tube wiring, right?
Yes, knob and tube wiring.
More and more of that's going.
I haven't. Go ahead.
I said more and more of that's going by the wayside, right?
Yes, I've only seen it basically taken apart most of the times in the homes, the older homes that I've gone into. My old in-laws had knob and tube in their house.
Really? I don't see it very often. So here's another electrical question. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, here's another question, and we've got a slide for this one too, and I see this a lot, and I know it's a safety hazard, and people will, the follow-up question is, hey, Ann, the home inspector said I need a new heavy up. What is that? And how does he know we need one? And so if you could talk about what the heavy up is and why it's a safety hazard and you need to maybe make some replacements.
Okay, I think a home inspector is more or less looking out for the buyer of the home, making sure that they have adequate capacity if they ever decide to do any upgrades in their home. You know, it's 2020 now. It's not 1970. So we have a lot of more electrical appliances. Although we're getting more energy efficient, we still are
Yeah.
using a lot of electricity. So in order for them to actually be able to expand, it's a great idea to expand and increase your ampacity of your electrical system. So if you have a 100 amp and you want to increase it to 150 or 200 amps, that is considered heavying up your service. So that means that your cable from the utility company to your electrical meter may need to increase in size. I've seen a lot of times that someone to their electrical meter, they may already have the capability of a 200 amp service, but they, you know, have a 100 amp service wire from the meter to the electrical panel. So they may just only have to change the wire from the panel to the meter. And then of course, change your electrical panel
So
to a 200 amp. Go ahead.
So you may have a situation where you don't have to change the panel, but you just have to change the service entry cable.
Well, I would say, well, that would be very rarely the case, because usually people will install 100 amps where they have 100 amps. But I've seen people have a 100 amp service entrance cable going into the house and have a 200 amp panel. And, you know, usually that possibly may not have been inspected. So you want to make sure that you get it inspected and make sure that whatever wire size that you have, if it's rated for, that you have the overcurrent protection. That means the breaker at your electrical panel, the main breaker, is actually rated for the wire size.
Okay. How about these pictures?
Yeah.
You see one in the lower left?
Okay.
See the frayed?
Yeah, so that is your frayed service entrance cable. And that could become very potentially hazardous because, you know, the sun's beating up on it, the water's beating up on it, and you can get water inside of there. Now that's breaking down the insulation. Now you could possibly have somebody brush against that and possibly get shocked. You could have a face-to-face fault where the insulation is worn. You could possibly have water going down into your electrical panel, using that cable as a conduit into your panel. So you definitely want to get your frayed service entrance cables replaced.
So for those of you watching, if you look at that picture in the lower left-hand corner, that cable comes in essentially from your service provider, right, Lafayette?
That particular one on the lower end, actually, I believe that is going into your home there. Okay. So that is the load side of the meter.
Okay, so above,
in your the one on the left upper one, the cable that's on the top side of that meter is going to the utility company. But you know, the electricians actually replace those as well. We take it all the way up to the service head, and then the utility company takes it from there.
And guys, the service head looks kind of like a shower head around your roof line, and it has wires coming out of it, right, Lafayette?
Absolutely, yes.
The other thing I want to say for those of you watching, if you're like, what the heck cable is she talking about here, since there's a few of them, if you look at that lower left picture and you look at that black thick cable that curves on the right-hand side of the picture, and it's got what looks like diagonal silver lines in it, that's your service entrance cable, and that's supposed to have a nice, thick, solid conduit around it. It's not, so this conduit has worn away, so you're seeing, you're sort of like the outer layer of the skin is off. So
right, yeah. The conduit that you're referring to is basically an outer jacket of insulation. It's a gray polyvinyl like insulation covering of that cable.
So when you see this, you know you don't have the protection you need. So all All right, I'm glad we talked about that. I know I had so many questions, and I wonder, Lafayette, if sometime we should do another one on like energy, like, energy as it relates to electrical work in the home. I think that might be a good time.
Okay.
But I think we're sort of running out of time here. I wanted to ask you what you think people should look for in an electrician. Like, if you were advising a cousin who lives in California, what would you say? Hey, be sure to ask them this, or ask for proof of insurance or license. Like, what would you, and what characteristics to or experience?
Okay, so if my mother lived away from me, or friends in another state or somewhere, and they're looking for an electrician, I would basically ask them if they know someone local that can refer them to an electrician. It's nothing better than having a referral, someone that gives that individual credibility.
I'm a big believer.
If they, what'd you say?
I said I'm a big believer in that referral business.
Yes, definitely a referral. But if they can't find a referral, to actually possibly interview some electricians, have them come out or speak with them over the phone, talk to them about their credentials. And if they actually have any referral or references themselves that they can refer to you, and just follow up with the references that they provide, and make sure that they are, licensed and insured as well, to protect yourself from any, faults or any things that they may cause around your home.
So, I mean, really, they should be willing to be conversant with you, right? And they should have a certain level of experience.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've found over the years in working with electricians and being in the industry myself, sometimes someone having the license, it does not mean that they are a great electrician or a good electrician. Some of them may have bad practices themselves, and may not even follow the code that they've passed the test for. So if it's very tricky, because electrical is a dangerous thing. It could burn your house down. People can lose their lives. And as I mentioned earlier, far as people possibly could have and generate electromagnetic fields in the house that can cause someone to have cancer. It's very serious, and a lot of people take it lightly.
Yeah, we don't need any more cancer around. I thank you for that. I get very frustrated when contractors don't speak with my clients. They act like they should be in and out and get paid. And it's like,
right.
I've got a client who has questions or wants to become educated. I want to refer somebody who will take the time to answer the questions. So
right.
I appreciate that you're that kind of contractor, and that you would recommend they look for the same, regardless of where they are in the world, looking for an electrician. So
right.
I'll say too, I take the electrical stuff really, really seriously. Here's Lafayette's contact info. I take the electrical stuff real seriously, because as Lafayette knows, years ago, during one of the Snowmageddons, we had an electrical fire in my house. And I had the fire chief in later and a master electrician, and they both said it was the worst panel fire they had ever seen that didn't take the house with it. And in fact, they took my electrical panel and they taught from it after that. So it was really wicked. It didn't burn the house down, thank God, but it did do a lot of damage, and we had to live elsewhere for several days and, get a new panel and service entry cable and all that. So it's really, really serious, you guys, this electrical stuff. And, if you ever want to bounce something off me, I'm happy to chat and point you in the right direction. But in the meantime, you've now heard from a really good master electrician who I trust implicitly. Here's his contact info. He's licensed in Maryland and Virginia, and soon to be in DC. And that's his direct mobile number. So you can reach out to him, you can email him. If you remember that you saw this, but you can't remember where to find his info, always feel free to reach out to me and or Jennifer. You can call, email, text. As we wrap up here, we've run a little long on time. I actually have more questions, but we'll save it for another time. Lafayette, do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to share with folks about electrical and electrical safety. And guys, Ann is a great realtor. She's actually one of my favorite realtors and friends. She's very knowledgeable in the real estate agency and the real estate industry. Anytime I think of a professional, I think of Ann. She does phenomenal. She also always put out marketing materials, let us know what the new seasons are bringing and everything. So guys, if you ever have any questions or looking for a great realtor, definitely consider Ann McClure.
Thank you, Lafayette. That was a very nice plug, and I appreciate it. So we're going to wrap up here. I also want to thank Jennifer because she pulls the strings like the Wizard of Oz behind the scenes and creates the slides for us. And she did a great job, Lafayette. Thanks for all your great information. We're going to be back again in 2 weeks. We're doing this every other week now because people are back at work and busier and it's summertime. And we'll see you in 2 weeks with another great local expert. And if in the meantime, as Lafayette said, you also find yourself needing a real estate expert, I happen to know a good one and would be happy to talk with you or your friends, family, or colleagues about buying or selling or whatever question I can answer. I obviously know some really good local service providers. So thank you for joining us today. We'll catch you next time. And in the meantime, happy summer and have a great week. Happy 4th of July. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.